So, Garrett Nussmeier, how does a quarterback go from one of the best in the country, let alone in the SEC, a future first-round draft prospect, a top contender for the Heisman? How does one go from that to this? Benched. All within a span of 2.5 months. See, this right here is a statement that would have been out of this world levels of unbelievable in the offseason. I mean, this was a guy, a lot of people just, like if you told anybody, oh, he's going to fail, you just would not believe it. A quarterback who headed into the season with high expectations, not only for the college level, but solidifying his status as one of the best going into next year's draft class. 3 months later, and let's just say it's not going exactly how anybody would have imagined, especially for Garrett, who came back for the 2025 season on his final year of eligibility in hopes of taking the Tigers to a national championship, and doing just really so much more for the team as he claimed he had unfinished business. He felt the need to do something meaningful for his home state of Louisiana. If he didn't, it would let him all down, stating his loyalty and pride meant too much just to leave him behind after a strong 24 season that already had his name around late first, second round talks had he made the jump. Little did he know, him returning would not only be a disaster for the LSU program, but would eventually hurt his future, going from potentially being some team's quarterback one to not even knowing if he's the quarterback one for LSU anymore. I can't exactly say how the rest of his college career will play out, or if he'll even get another snap, but what I do know is, all these talks we had about Nussmeier going into this season aged horribly. Honestly, can't even say where he's going to fall in the draft anymore. Truly a damn shoot yourself in the foot moment. Was supposed to step forward and instead stepped backwards down a flight of stairs. If the Alabama game truly was the end of the Nussmeier era for LSU, then the downfall must be studied. But in order to get to his downfall, we gotta start at the beginning. Before we do get into it, all I do ask is subscribe if you are new here. It does help my channel and does put my name out there more. But anyways, with all that being said, let's get into the fall from grace that is Garrett Nussmeier. So, coming all the way back to the start, we are taking to Marcus High School in Flower Mound, Texas, where father like son, it didn't take him long until he found himself at the quarterback position. He played with the Marauders for 3 seasons, each one doing better than the other. 2018, as a sophomore, he threw for 1,157 passing yards with a 12-5 touchdown interception ratio on 122 completions for 218 attempts. Nothing too crazy, but a solid year overall, leading his team to a 5-5 record. This season will really just be the tip of the iceberg for the things they're about to see next year. Because come 2019 as a junior, he'd explode right on the scene, putting his team on an 11-game win streak to later make a deep run in the Texas 6A D2 playoffs, where they would lose in regionals. And this season, Nussmeier would throw for a whopping 3,788 passing yards with 38 touchdowns, with only 10 picks on 288 completions with 431 attempts, finishing the year with a 67% completion percentage, making a massive jump from the season before, where it's night and day difference with his improvement, even being named the 6A Texas MVP. This year will be a very large one for his future, not only showing he was a very consistent playmaker and one of Texas' toughest classifications, but it would solidify his name as a top recruit for most big name programs to go after who needed a quarterback. 2020 will roll around, where he'd be in his final year of high school football, where it didn't take long for him to pick up right where he left off in 19, taking his team to a strong 9-0 start before their first loss in what would be his final game. Due to the pandemic, where they would unanimously win the division on the shortened year, and not to mention also breaking his hand, putting him out for the season anyways. Which, even though the season was short, Nussmeier would still throw for nearly 3,000 yards with 33 touchdowns and only 5 picks, showcasing massive consistency, completing 213 passes out of 293 attempts, compared to his 431 the year before. So the fact his numbers look even oddly similar with less opportunities just says a lot. From his excellent accuracy to decision making, he came out of high school as a 4-star prospect with a very large ceiling. So as I said earlier, after his junior season, a lot of programs saw the way he handled the system and carried around a gunslinger mentality. Someone who was ready to take over any program and be a large multi-year starter. So the moment he graduated, he'd have a wide range of offers come his direction as the 14th best quarterback in the recruiting class of 2021 and 3rd in the state of Texas, behind guys like Quinn Ewers and Jalen Milroe. And it wasn't like no 10 offers, not 15, not 20, fucking 29. I mean 30 according to some places, but 29 is all I could find. Places like LSU, Missouri, UTSA, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Wake Forest, SMU, Boise State, Penn State, Michigan State, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Colorado, Kansas, TCU, Georgia, Oregon State, Louisville, Purdue, Arkansas, Miami, Mississippi, Texas, Oklahoma State, Texas State, North Texas, Baylor, Texas A&M, and Washington State. Where it wouldn't be the main for to 2020, where the decision would be made when he'd release a commitment video saying he was going back to his roots and he'd be taking his talents to LSU. Fully enrolling by 2021, which, well, as most of you watching this would know, he didn't play until 2024. 2021 for his true freshman season. He'd take a redshirt, only appearing in 4 games, sitting behind the one-hit wonder Max Johnson, who truly only had one good season before doing next to nothing at the next 2 programs he went to. Which is truly tragic to say, because I know before injuries fucked the guy over. I mean, he was pretty damn solid. But his best season will be when Nussmeier arrived, as he would sit and learn as the Tigers went 6-6 that year, with hopes maybe he'd get to start for 22, which he would actually be a strong candidate. But certain things happened, like Coach O getting replaced by Brian Kelly in November of 2021, which the new head coach signing would eventually lead to the biggest recruit for the upcoming season, landing Jaden Daniels from Arizona State in the transfer portal. Which is no secret, I mean, it's pretty damn obvious. Brian Kelly had something to do with it, as Kelly knew who Daniels was since he was a high school recruit. Following his journey over at Arizona State, knowing he would go work at LSU, he had to start off his tenure right by picking up a quarterback who he believed had plenty of untapped potential, and one he could help develop to get to that level. Which, looking back at this in the future, you bet your ass he did that exactly. But at the moment in 2022, nobody knew how this was going to play out. So come to spring, there was a quarterback competition between Jaden, Nuss, and Miles Brennan, the starter from 2020 before injuries, in which Daniels would ultimately win the threesome battle, getting the starting spot. So you have a new head coach and his hand-selected prospect to kick off the year, which 2022 was an instant success compared to the last, with a 10-4 record and a bowl victory, with Daniels being a large key factor in most of this, with a breakout season, not just for rushing with 11 rushing touchdowns and the receiving, also for passing, where he showed significant growth, throwing for nearly 3,000 passing yards on a 68% completion percentage for the season, which would be his personal best on 266 completions for 388 attempts, with a 17-3 touchdown interception ratio, which was the best he's looked since his first season at Arizona State in 2019, with strong performances against teams like Alabama, Florida, Ole Miss. Performances like these showed the doubters who said he'd face hardships jumping conferences that he and his team can hang with some of the SEC's best. So for a great 2022 season, it served as a red carpet for the year we were about to get by Daniels in 23. So once again, Nussmeier would backseat the quarterback room for his 3rd season, patiently waiting for his turn. 2023 would start, and so would the Daniels Heisman campaign, with a dominant season, throwing for 3,812 passing yards with 40 touchdowns. 40 to just 4 picks. 4, which is just truly an insane stat line to read out loud. Like 40 touchdowns to 4 picks. You know, for a guy who had a massive turnover problem, just to do this, just what the hell? And that's just his passing stats. Rushing stats were even crazier. He had 135 carries, which turned into 1,134 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. And not only did he later set the FBS single season passer rating at 208, but he and his offense would lead the nation at 412 yards of offense per game. The season was so damn crazy, it launched Daniels into a category that most dual threats, let alone just dual threats in the SEC, rarely see, and that's being one of 7 all-time to have more than 3,500 passing yards paired with 1,000 rushing yards in a single season. Arguably one of the best, if not most elite seasons for any college quarterback in recent years, making him one of the most talked about names to end the season. From things like him being named the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, being named on the first team All-SEC, or maybe just the fact that Daniels was the 3rd LSU player in history to ever win the Heisman. It would be this year that also catapulted him to the top of all draft boards, going from a mid-round quarterback to one of the best options to take. And well, you know, I don't need to tell you how it went from there. You pretty much already know what happened. So with the 2023 season wrapping up and Nussmeier stating he was not going to transfer, it looked as 2024 the gunslinger would finally get his opportunity. 2024, Nussmeier would enter the season with a lot of hype riding behind him. I mean, you just shadowed a Heisman quarterback. You don't just do that and not exceed the standard that he set. Plus, with the expectations he had coming out of high school from the media to the coaching staff, watching him learn and develop the last 3 years through practice, he had some pretty big shoes to fill. Couldn't be somebody who would learn as they go. No, they needed somebody who could step in now and continue just to deliver efficient enough like Daniels was doing. And well, let's just say delivering is what he did. Game 1 against USC. Yeah, they would lose, but he looked pretty good, so it was an upside with the loss. Nussmeier completed 30 for 39, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. For technically his first start in a while, like I said, he was good outside the 1 pick. But for a debut game, you really couldn't ask for one better. Solid enough to feel confident in his offense. Game 2, he would torch nickels. I did not know there was a college program named after a coin. Anyways, 44-21 victory with 302 passing yards with a large 6 passing touchdowns that would tie Daniels for second most thrown in a game by a Tigers quarterback on his 27 completion for 37 attempts with a 73% completion percentage. So pretty good second game performance overall, especially when at one point the score was 23-21 after he left in the second quarter due to cramps before marching back in the third and taking over the close matchup and blowing it out of the water. This would also mark his first game in the Tiger Stadium, and quickly the staff was impressed with Kelly saying Nussmeier was a very efficient passer who was very effective for the system. Game 3, South Carolina. Nussmeier's performance was far from perfect, to say the least. Throwing for a much lower completion percentage than usual, not to mention also throwing a costly interception that should have been a game-changing pick 6. And had the pick 6 go through, I guarantee that was a loss right there. But of course, it got called back on a controversial foul, which personally, if you ask me still to this day, it should have not been called. It was a clean hit, but because it got called back, it would give South Carolina the ball instead of 6 points. Where that, Nussmeier would show massive strength and resilience to drive him right back down the field for a game-winning run by Josh Williams to seal the comeback victory. So again, while his performance wasn't the cleanest, he in the run game did everything necessary to keep them in this game that at one point was a 17-0 deficit, throwing for 285 passing yards with 2 passing touchdowns on 24 completions for 40 attempts. By far, South Carolina was his biggest test of his career. I mean, they trailed majority of the game, defense was putting the work on him in this offense, it was a hostile territory, which if you add all that up, you knew he was playing under pressure most of this matchup. So to come out on top, even with the mistakes he made in this matchup, was huge. Games like these is what really could boost the quarterback's confidence. Games like these is what separates average quarterbacks from the elites. Games like these is what kickstarts careers for the future. So 3 games in, 2-1 record, nearly 900 yards thrown with a 10-2 touchdown interception ratio. He was looking great. Then he would go torch UCLA for 3 touchdowns, 352 on 44 attempts with 32 completions. Then he would go on to beat Southern Alabama for 409 passing yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks on 39 attempts with 26 completions. And then he'd have another big game performance against Ole Miss where he would throw for 337 yards with 3 passing touchdowns and another 2 picks, which is a concern knowing back-to-back week he's thrown for more than 2 picks. And for one that came down to the very end, those 2 picks could have been very crucial. He would have his lowest completion percentage of the year so far at 43%, throwing for 22 completions on 51 attempts. Then he would go on to have a calm performance against Arkansas. Nothing too crazy, didn't throw for a touchdown, didn't throw a pick, had 233 yards on 23 completions for 34 attempts. And then after this, they would go on a 3-game losing streak. A&M, Alabama, and Florida, where he would have a somewhat strong performance against A&M, throwing for 405 yards with 2 touchdowns, but also threw 3 costly interceptions, with 25 completions for 50 attempts. Then after that, he would go on to Alabama and get completely stomped out, throwing 2 picks, 1 touchdown, barely 240 yards on 42 attempts with 27 completions. Then after this, he would go on to Florida to lose, throwing for only 260 yards with 1 touchdown, throwing for yet another 40+ pass attempts, only making half of it. Then for the last 3 games on their schedule, he beat Vanderbilt, throwing for 332 on 28 completions for 37 attempts with 1 passing touchdown, would topple Oklahoma, throwing for 277 and 3 touchdowns on 22 completions for 31 attempts. Then they would get an invitation to the Texas Bowl where he would beat Baylor with a very strong performance to close out the season. 313 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 24 completions on 34 attempts. ending the season with 4,052 passing yards with a 29-12 touchdown interception ratio, rounded out at about a 64% completion percentage. So, what was the main takeaway from the 2024 season? It was a mixed year, but man, was he talented. I mean, the arm talent was just straight up undeniable. Some might even say elite. Yeah, he'd have his weaknesses, especially against intense pressure, but when he can get it going, dude was a pure commander the way he led the offense to victory. He was a very consistent producer with quick processing speeds, great timing, beautiful deep ball, just being able to produce excellent touch on all three levels of the field, large football IQ, and genuinely was one tough son of a bitch. I mean, the way he take big hits, just because remember, Nussmeier is not a big guy. The guy weighs like maybe about 190, 200 barely. So the fact he's able to take big hits, get up, and go back to making just big play after big play just says a lot of resilience about the guy. And despite the limited experience, scouts were saying if he entered the 2025 draft, he would win high, with being a second rounder at minimum. To me, I think he would have been up there at least as one of the better pro-style quarterbacks, but with his weaknesses, I can't say I saw him over someone like Dart or Ward, and he still had plenty to work on, like for starters, turnovers. He's not someone shy when it comes to turning the ball over at poor moments, particularly in the red zone, where ball security was a massive problem. That, or while he's got pretty decent decision making at times, who makes some questionable throws every now and then facing pressure. Another problem, depending on who it was or who was rushing his way, it was either forced him to make bad throws under pressure instead of taking a sack or throwing the ball out, which can be explained by some of his higher sacked games. Because let's face facts, Nussmeier is not a fast quarterback. Which also gets into my third complaint and another weakness I saw in this game. While he's able to evade defenders at times, this dude is not that much of an athlete. Yes, he might make a few run plays here and there, but it is so damn rare. I mean, he doesn't exactly have the speed that can beat out most NFL level defenses. If you saw my draft video when I talked about the 2025 class, I paid no attention his way because I knew he wasn't going to be ready to come out yet, despite the elite season he was having already. I said one more season like 24 with less turnovers would launch him in talks of being the quarterback one for 2026. I think he had the tools already to be a top name, but with more development and refinement for another year, it would make him a stronger prospect, so returning for 2025 it was. And now we get to the start of the 2025 season. So, going into this year, after declaring his return, expectations were large. And lots of people were expecting to make an impact this season. Same say with plenty of others. His name was up there in the clouds, with guys like Sellers, Klubnik, Lagway, Aller, which is kind of funny to look back on because all these guys suck ass this season. But yeah, anyways, they expected Nuss to take the next step, labeling him Heisman worthy. Potential first overall pick. You name it, the media said it. And it wasn't like it was undeserving either, like somebody else in the SEC who woke up one morning and said, I'm Arch Manning. After throwing for 4,000 last season, especially with it being his first starting year, yeah, I'm gonna believe he's gonna do good next season. I ain't even afraid to admit it, but I sipped a little bit on the Kool-Aid myself and even ranked him number one going into this season. Mainly going off what I saw last year, all the transfers and talent LSU was bringing in from new receivers to the O-line. I mean, when a program goes all in for your final season, yeah, I expect greatness like plenty of others, or at least something similar to 24, and not the fucking mediocrity we're about to get. And what should have been his sequel to a great first year, his strong campaign before the draft, would become his large fall from grace. To me, I believe it all started back in the preseason when there were talks and rumors about his abdominal injury and how it affected his reps going into the new year. And it would also have an effect on the way he played the first couple of weeks. I mean, just watching him from the start to his benching, you could see something felt off. You know, not a single game this year that truly felt like a Nussmeier performance. It slipped by Clemson, which the defense and run game get massive props for being the main factor in their victory. They smoked Louisiana Tech 23-7, but he didn't have your typical explosive performance he normally would against teams like these. Like last year's Nussmeier would have torched his team for 375 with 3 touchdowns. Yeah, you can blame that on the conservative play calling or the dog shit O-line he has. But with injuries like I mentioned earlier, it definitely affects the way he used to just let the ball rip down the field. He didn't even throw a pick in this game, which shows his poor decision making has not gone away. 2 games in the year and he's already off to a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, which is a massive drop back from the way he started last season. But of course it was still early on, so maybe eventually he put it all together. That is until week 3 where he had yet another mixed performance. Not bad overall, but it wasn't anything that stood out or that said Nussmeier's back. It was more of a defensive beatdown with the defense picking off Lagway 5 different times, with one of those being a pick 6, with the only touchdown of the day coming from Nussmeier on a 23-yard dime for 6, where he threw for 220 on 15 completions for 27 attempts, also throwing a pick in the process, showing mistakes are still going to be made, with most of the production on the day outside of him being the run game for 93 yards. So another week, another win, and another okay solid performance from Nussmeier. Not flawless, there were still plenty of areas to make improvements, but solid. Week 4 is your typical stat padding game, and then we get to week 5 against Ole Miss, where he would throw for 197 yards on 21 completions and 34 attempts, with his third pick of the season in a close matchup. That was already stated, they would only win this game if Nussmeier stepped up. Going into this game, they knew defense was not going to do all the work like they were doing for the first couple of weeks. This was one where he needed to be the better quarterback out of the two playing between him and Chambliss. Although in this game at times you could see the injuries the coaching staff brushed off earlier coming to surface, affecting the way Garrett played in the pocket. And with no run game also, as star running back Durham was out with an ankle injury. It was all up to him, which as you can imagine, it went poor. Ole Miss, which is applying the right amount of pressure thanks to this boo-boo ass O-line, and Nussmeier was just stalling drives, missing throws left and right, failing to put it in the hands of the receivers at the right timing, with poor decision making, especially on his pick, sometimes even underthrowing balls that would have been huge plays through the air. Yet again, another week where he'd struggle to produce. But thankfully after the Ole Miss loss, they would get a bye week, and for Nussmeier, it was a week to hopefully rest up and get back to his old self. At this moment, he only completed 68% of his passes for 960 yards with a 6-2 touchdown interception ratio, flashing more weaknesses than strengths, showing he has not improved much over the offseason and looks like a former shell of his 2024 self. And then after the bye week, they would go on to South Carolina, where he would look somewhat like himself again, throwing for 254 passing yards on 20 completions for 33 attempts, throwing for 2 touchdowns with yet another 2 picks and an ugly 20-10 victory. Solid nonetheless, and even showed up his mobility a bit, running for 30 yards. Could it have been better? Probably. His accuracy and consistency could have been a bigger presence in this game, especially without the 2 turnovers. Not to mention stalling out on drives and completely failing to execute on 2 different drives in the red zone. It was a mixed game. But for also playing a team that struggled to put up more than 10 points against this defense, he wasn't really asked to do all that much. So it was good enough and a sign he can get the Nuss Buzz back on track for a strong season, just as long as he can keep the turnovers under control. And then we turn to LSU's matchup against Vanderbilt. Great performance, 67% completion percentage, 225 yards with 2 touchdowns, and thankfully no picks. This was a game that looked the closest to Nussmeier from last season. Accuracy was put on display. The deep ball was there, and you bet it was effective. The great decision making and just being levels of efficient and productive that we saw almost on a consistent basis last year was all here on display. Just too damn bad the defense had no answer for Vanderbilt's run game, or should I just say Diego Pavia, you know, the SEC's living nightmare, the one-man wrecking crew. So despite his strong performance, it wasn't enough to help the team walk away from this matchup with the W. And then we get to the game where the roller coaster would start to go downhill. Shit would hit the fan here as they would go on to play A&M, where Nuss would throw for a record low of 168 passing yards, which for him is just fucking low. I mean, completely choking on himself in the second half, stalling on just about every drive they had, missing throw after throw. Yeah, he didn't throw a pick shockingly enough, but his yardage was stupidly low to keep pace in this ass whooping that the Aggies offense was giving them, not to also mention getting sacked 7 times and doing next to nothing most of the game. Like, for a matchup like this, most people expected something much better rather than the underwhelming shit show we got. He wasn't the main reason they lost. I think the whole team itself did it no favors in this game, but he also certainly did nothing to help elevate this offense either. He'd be benched near the end for Michael Van Buren, and would also be after this game when Brian Kelly was finally let go by the program, signaling their season is pretty much cooked after their 3rd loss. And then we get to the final stop that would be at the Nuss Bus, Alabama, where the unexpected would finally happen. Yes, he would be benched against the Aggies, but it was in a blowout already. It kind of made just a little bit of sense. In this game though, LSU will pull the plug on Nussmeier in the 3rd quarter, where it was still a close game and confused a lot of people on why they did it. But the truth was, he played horrible. You could say he threw for 18 completions on 21 attempts, but it was barely for any gain outside of a few throws in the 1st and 3rd. I mean, it wouldn't be no different if you or I were on the field and I checked it off to the running back or the close wide receiver to me for a gain of 2 yards. If you were watching the game, you'd just see how slow this offense was moving. Not to mention him making boneheaded mistake after mistake, including a horrific sack where he ran backwards into a defender, which to me perfectly sums up how the season has gone for him. Instead of moving forwards, he'd go backwards, only hurt the team and himself. So it'd be after this sack where Michael Van Buren would play the rest of the game out in a loss that would put the Tigers 5-4. And while nothing's official at the moment, you can pretty much read the room. It says Nussmeier's time as their quarterback is up and Van Buren's time is now. From the shitty O-line to his health making him limited all year, there's no point in playing Garrett any longer. It sucks to say, I like the guy as a prospect, but there's no point in playing him when you have a sophomore with a more dual threat ability who could thrive behind a leaky O-line like this, who would also be burning a red shirt just for him to sit on the bench? And for Nussmeier, there is no point because damage is already done. 3 games left and you mean to tell me you think there's a chance? Yeah. He'd go from a potential first rounder to start a year to a project in the late 3rd or 4th if he's lucky and shows out to Combine or even Senior Bowl. Again, so to sum it up, lots of people would be blamed for the regression we saw this season. Number 1, I blame Nussmeier. He struggled large with his accuracy and decision making that's led to him creating turnovers, which was a large concern people would hope he'd fix in the offseason. While often missing throws and reads, he would have hit wearing a blindfold back in 24. Outside the Vanderbilt game, barely. He hasn't had a clean performance all year long. Physically, he has not been in his best shape. I mean, still isn't. You remember how Ears was playing through that injury, which was later revealed to affect him? I'm seeing the same thing here. Mentally, he wasn't all there either. He played quarterback like a deer in headlights, knowing he's got very little time before he gets hit. But of course, that's paired with something else I want to blame. This dog shit O-line. In the offseason, I was told we were about to see massive improvement. The left tackle, true freshman. Fucking sucks. Right tackle, we don't even know who he is. They keep using a different guy every single week. Like, no shit, they're getting outmatched on a consistent basis. I'd be scarred too to play behind this line knowing they don't have my back if their lives depended on it. Pretty much leaving Nussmeier to be a sitting duck 24/7 because with how bad it is, it doesn't give him much of a run game to rely on. This is a line that would have you seeing ghosts. But I also can't say I put it all on him because even when they actually buy him time, he doesn't actually do anything good with it. Then we get to play calling. Straight up horrendous. I can't figure out how you would get rid of the pass game downfield and just resort to screens and hitches because these dumbasses sure can. With a bad O-line like this, you pretty much have to get rid of the thing that worked well last season. So with that, it stalls out drives and gives the ball right back to the opponent. Which for a top program like this, the offense being able to move should not be a problem. And then number 4, my biggest blame next to the O-line, Brian Kelly. This fucking moron knew Nussmeier was not 100% since the preseason, and instead of giving him the time he needed to get back to himself, this guy downplayed any talk to Nussmeier's injury, saying he was fine, it didn't exist, he's good to go, and even when he would acknowledge it, he's still good to go, he's already in shape. When in reality, he wasn't, and it shows for the painfully mediocre performances we were getting. He was out there trying to make throws he could not make anymore. The injury was put on display, nobody would do a damn thing. A reasonable coach would have had to back him in majority of the year, regardless of it being your senior's final season to prove himself. But now that he's benched, now the injury's finally causing him to miss some time. Pure bullshit. So, for his ultimate regression in a disappointing year, I blame him while also saying I blame the program. They let him down big, and it's one of those things where you wonder what would have happened had he made the jump last year. Would LSU be in a better spot now with more consistent play out of Bryce Underwood? Since you know Nussmeier would have been gone, it would have gave the program much more of a reason to go after him like they were trying to do last year before Michigan threw the big offer his direction. But of course, since Nussmeier was returning, there was no point in paying all that money just to have someone who wanted to start now sit a year. Would Nussmeier have already been starting in the NFL or sitting behind a veteran learning as he goes? I don't know, but it's got to be crushing knowing that you could have been in that scenario instead of the one he's in now, not even knowing if somebody's gonna take the chance at him. In the end, it'd be his loyalty to the program and wanting to be the next great to do something meaningful. Like Burrow winning the National, Daniels becoming their 3rd Heisman with hopes he'd be the next guy to do something big like that, instead of just leaving off on a 4,000-yard season when he was already in high talks. But unfortunately for the Nuss bus, his ride to the top would crash midway there and he'd get a different type of ending. And it's surely not the one anybody expected. And that will do it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching another random recap. I know I got this video out like right on the day as they're playing, which as of recently it's been named Michael Van Buren gets the start. Garrett Nussmeier will not see the field against Arkansas, so I figured it'd be appropriate to upload this video. Garrett Nussmeier was surely an interesting prospect, one that I actually thought was going to be big in talks this year for the draft, and it's a damn shame that, well, the season said otherwise. The season, if anything, highlighted more weaknesses than he did showing strengths, putting on blast to programs and teams and scouts, he's maybe not that guy after all. But anyways, I really hope y'all did enjoy the video, and with all that being said, I will see you on the next Random Recap.